have a news story hit close to home? Well, we have one that hit close to home to me. Hi, welcome to Azimuth Podcast. I'm Kimberly McNabb, and with me as always is my loving husband, Barrett McNabb. So, the story coming out of Georgia with Laken Riley really hit close home for me. I went to the University of Georgia. I've run that trail that her unfortunate murder happened on. I worked at the dining halls where Jose Antonio Ibarra's brother, Diego, worked. He worked at Bolton Dining Hall. I met my best friend, whom you've met, at Bolton Dining Hall. I lived in Russell Hall. I worked at Village Summit Dining Hall, which is much closer to the intramural fields where Laken Riley met her unfortunate end.
And you know, the interesting thing is we, you know, I knew that you worked there, and I knew you went to the University of Georgia and being a big runner. And I think you and I came to the same conclusion at the same time, that these were all the locations that you used to frequent.
Oh, yes. And I used to live down the street from the Lake Carrick at Riverbend apartment complex. And the thing that struck me was not only did his brother, Jose Antonio's brother, Diego, work at the dining hall, Bolton Dining Hall, that's across the campus where the lake is, where they lived. So not only is he in Athens, he's crossing that campus every day. Fortunately, the University of Georgia found out about this and fired him. So that's very fortunate. But, you know, the story really hit home close to me. So there are multiple layers of fault here. So top up at the local government, you have Mayor Gertz said, well, Athens isn't a sanctuary city. This whole story highlights the difference between law and policy.
Exactly.
So if the law is not enforced, your policy sucks.
Right.
So
people will run with either one, whether it's the law or policy.
Yes, and they'll blame you for it. So he says, well, Georgia doesn't allow for cities to be sanctuary cities. But, you know, the protesters demand that he revoke his 2019 resolution in which the county government welcomed people from all lands, and Gertz himself had signed in 2019. So you have the mayor, you have the Sheriff Williams. His whole campaign was not building a culture of fear. And so he campaigned on not cooperating with ICE. Building relationships is key. And if we're antagonizing them because they're undocumented, they're not likely to come to us. We won't be involved in rounding up people. Well, first of all, you're not ICE. That's not your job. And we won't be contributing to the culture of fear. Well, you know what? Okay, so you're not going to round them up. But when they commit illegal acts, then deport them. I mean,
the problem that I have with that statement is obviously, you know, that is circumventing the intent of Georgia law to not have sanctuary cities. And so it's kind of like one of those things where it's a wink and a nod. We're going to go ahead and have policies that are not written down in that we won't cooperate with ICE, or we'll make statements to say that we won't cooperate with ICE, when in effect what that does is it broadcasts that you are a sanctuary city by virtue of saying what you will not do. And so through exclusion, you're raising your hand and saying, hey, we're a sanctuary city.
You're advertising, basically advertising, because, again, people underestimate how much the rest of the world watches us so much more than we watch them. I mean, most of us can't point out some of these countries from which these illegal immigrants come from. On a map, they know where we are. They know our policies, regardless of whatever the law is, and they pay attention, and you're going to attract the worst of the worst. You know, this is not the first thing he has done. He should have been arrested at least 3 other times. He was caught drinking and driving with a beer can in his hand with no license. If either one of us did this, we would be in jail. No question. He was out roaming the streets. And then he first passed through Texas, went up to New York, committed several acts up there, did not get arrested because of lack of space, came to Georgia, and committed other things, of course.
And that's the problem, where you look at this as, is it a local problem? Is it a state problem? Is it a national problem? It's nested. It is the same problem no matter what level of government you go to. And by having these policies, even at the federal law limit, allowing people to come in and getting released, catch and release, it encourages this behavior. And unfortunately, this is part of the result of it.
Well, every layer of law enforcement is, from federal to city, the sheriff, and let's not forget the DA. There's a Democratic DA in Athens, Georgia. She has removed herself from the case because she, quote, does not want to be involved for political gain. No, lady, it's because your record sucks.
Right.
Okay. So of all the criminal cases that have been brought to her, zero guilty verdicts. Zero. So, and also her office in 2023 chose not to prosecute 46% of the cases that it closed. In 2023, of the felonies charged under her leadership, 130 felonies were downgraded to misdemeanors, most of which only got probation. Felonies.
Which just encourages more bad behavior.
Yeah. So, if I still lived in Athens, I'd be afraid. And don't send your kids to school there. That's all I have to say about that. So we've covered the levels of fault at the local level.
And we had
ties into federal.
Just yesterday. We had
yesterday.
Competing visits between President Biden and former President Trump. Biden went to a dog and pony show in Brownsville, Texas, where everything was nice and clean and cleaned up and sanitized, and he got to shake hands, but he couldn't help himself but bring in climate change into his speech.
And called climate change deniers Neanderthals. Oh, they'll win you some votes.
Yeah,
of course, we weren't going to
exactly.
vote for you anyway, but just...
But then you had Trump going to Eagles Pass, Texas, where the problem is, the nexus is, and the same location that we went to 2 weeks ago and did our first live stream. Mm-hmm. He had a different tech. The Border Patrol Association president, just absolutely lambasted President Biden and his policies. I can't believe it. I can't believe it.
Well, Biden received a lot of criticism from the locals. They were like, well, the last time he came to the border was over a year ago. He went to El Paso. The visit only lasted 4 hours.
And everything was cleaned up there and sanitized so that it was all nice and hunky-dory.
And Eagles Pass is a much busier point than Brownsville. If you rank all the different crossing points along the border, Brownsville's number 29. So not super busy. It's far less busy now that Governor Abbott has, put the concertina wire and all of that. So he went to the 29th busiest place. Why else would he go there? Brownsville has a strong Democratic foothold. So he's going to have more allies there, and it's going to be a little more friendly.
Right.
Because, God forbid, any confrontation. And this visit was also on the same day that the White House started referring to illegal immigrants as newcomers. Okay, this reminds me of when I worked at Target and Macy's, and we would refer to customers, which sounds kind of bland and, obligatory, to guests.
Right.
They're our guests.
Even George Carlin has a bit about this where he's talking about the evolution of language. Now, what he was talking about was shell shock. And so in World War I, it was called shell shock. In World War II, it was called combat fatigue. In Vietnam, it was post-traumatic stress disorder. And so it's the same thing. It's having nightmares from combat and things like that. But it was just slowly neutered. The language was neutered in order to fit a narrative. And so here we go. We have illegal aliens, illegal immigrants, migrants, and now newcomers.
Can you imagine what George Carlin would say today?
Yeah, he would have a lot of fun with that.
Oh, he would have so much fun with everything. Oh,
right.
God bless him. So another interesting figure, Vivek Ramaswamy was not so crazy when he said we need to protect the northern border.
And people laughed at him. People laughed at him when he said
what?
that.
Is there a problem? Well, guess what? 3 Chinese got caught crossing the border in Maine.
Yep. And here's the real kicker. So the person that was waiting in a car to pick them up was he himself, a Chinese national that had snuck across the border and was under the release program and pending his immigration status. So he snuck across, got caught, catch and release, was released, and then got himself a car and assisted 3 additional Chinese nationals to come and sneak across the border where he had a waiting car and he was going to pick them up. So, I mean, here is, again, we're seeing an influx of single Chinese men that are coming across the border. It's happening in Southern California, but it's also happening in the north part of the United States. And here's the big thing on that. When you look at when people disagree with illegal immigration, the left immediately loves to hit you're a racist button. They love to hit the easy button and just say you're a racist. Cannot anybody see the security issue of people sneaking across the border, southern border, northern border? We're not talking about a specific race. We're talking about people that are hostile, a country that is hostile to the United States. It should bother you. It really should. And it does. It bothers the majority of Americans. It's the number one issue, which is why Biden is now finally starting to go to the border and address it and say, hey, I can do some executive actions that he could have done previously, but now that people are jumping up and down and making such a big scene of it. You know, Elon Musk, he recently said the reason that illegal immigrants are not being deported is he understands that the Democrats see them as potential voters. Mm-hmm. He sees that at some point in time they're going to vote blue, and every person that they deport is going to be a loss of a potential Democrat vote. Now, one of the things, there's a conspiracy theory about this great replacement theory, in that white people are concerned that there is a conspiracy to have brown people come into the country. That's absurd. Who cares? The people that are coming across the borders are from Eastern Europe. So they're Caucasians. They're from the Middle East. Middle Easterns are Caucasians as well on the demographic. You have people from Africa, from South America. You have people coming in from everywhere, okay? It is not about race. It should be about security. Mm-hmm. And, Elon Musk, having been a legal immigrant, he is a naturalized citizen from South Africa. And he came here the correct way and waited in line and took his citizenship exam. And so I think he has the ability to speak wisely on the matter. But you can't argue with it's not necessarily about replacing white people. I think it's about replacing Republicans is really what it's boiling down to.
Yep, secure their vote. And they don't care about us. They care about their power.
Yeah, exactly.
Pure and simple.
And so, we have this uptick in violent offenses. Venezuela has closed their borders for return flights to take deported Venezuelan criminals back. Can you blame them? I mean, the ones that we want to send back are the ones that have committed violent crimes.
Yeah, they're not sending doctors and engineers and accountants. They're sending their criminals, and that's why Venezuela has hit a 22-year violent crime low, because they're sending them here. Yeah,
and they're like, look, we're not taking them back. So I mean, what do you do with them? I mean, what do you
Mexico.
do with them? Yeah. So the policy needs to change. Biden has now jumped on the train where we've said, hey, look, there's been a problem. There's a problem. You have his press secretary saying, no, the border is secure, and everybody's laughing at her. And just that's the talking point. The border is secure. There's nothing to see here until finally Biden said, okay, there's an emergency at the border. And then obviously
too little, too late.
She looks stupid because because he just completely undermined her dumb talking point.
I think she does that to herself anyway.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. I think when Admiral Kirby takes over her job and pushes her out of the way, I think there'll be some intelligence at the press secretary podium. So anyway, thanks for tuning in, and please stay tuned after these messages.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for listening. If you enjoy our show with all the stories we share, we would love your support.
And it's as easy as clicking that subscribe or follow button. This will ensure you never miss an episode and keeps us bringing you these important stories. Your support makes a huge difference. Thank you so much for being part of our podcast family.
Thanks, and keep tuning in.
It's alive! It's alive! AI is alive with bias. Welcome to Azimuth Podcast. I'm Kimberly McNabb.
And I'm Barrett McNabb. It's been in the news, if you haven't been living under a rock. Google's Gemini has absolutely been a debacle, an absolute debacle. It had immense amounts of bias that were in there. So anytime you wanted to type in give me a picture of a white person, it would come back and say, look, that's, we can't.
People who can't dance.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. People, shouldn't be defined by their characteristic of their skin, and I can give you examples of other people. But then if you typed in, give me a picture of a black person, bam, it's right there.
Yeah, not a problem. Not a problem at all.
And a lot of the issues that were going on, as well as historical figures. Give me a photograph of George Washington. And
He's a black guy.
the AI would replace George Washington's face with a African-American face or a Latino face. And it was just down the line. So this is the new battlefield, and conservatives are currently losing, and it's the battle for information. The battle for information. The Supreme Court just heard oral arguments this week on big tech and whether or not they were censoring conservative voices. And so the argument was that organizations like Facebook, /Meta, Instagram, Snapchat, things like that, are they a public forum where they, or a newspaper where they can choose what to publish, or are they more like a telephone system or a telegraph system where information just flows through the system? And the difference between that is one you can control and one you can't. Could you imagine if AT&T was able to censor sentences that they didn't like as you were having a conversation with your best friend?
Or say, oh, this is a conservative, I'm going to drop their call.
I'm going to drop their call, right? So AT&T can't do that. But Facebook can limit and or say that whatever speech that you say is against their policies and drop your speech. And the thing is they get to choose their own policies. So Texas and Florida have enacted laws that say that these big tech can't do that. But here's the big problem is it's already being done on a larger scale with Google. Can you imagine all of the searching that you do is going to be bias and has the potential to be bias? Sundar Pichai, who is the CEO of Google and Alphabet, has recently released a statement concerning that Gemini debacle, saying that the tool's response were offensive to people and had shown bias. But here's the thing. The bias comes from the person who programs it.
Yeah, AI is only as good as the person programming it.
And so who are the people at Google that get to choose?
Yeah, so if they're left-wingers, I mean, I have suspected this for a while because, like, I would read something on, Fox News or Town Hall or whatever, and then I'll think about it later, and I'm like, what website did I, read it on? And so I'll just Google it, and you can't find Fox News listed under the Google search results for like at least 2 pages. Or if I read something on Fox News and I wanted to see what other websites said about the topic, I would again, Google the same topic and still notice that Fox News
Right.
Or any right-leaning source would show up in the top 2 pages of Google search results. It would always be like, no matter what, just NBC, CBS, NBC would pop up first. So I suspected this for a while. But, they just think we're stupid. I mean, these tech companies really think we're stupid. And I think they knew it was biased when they put it out. They just wanted to see how loud we would scream and moan about it.
Right.
And kind of gauge and tweak from there. That's my little conspiracy theory.
90% of all political contributions from Google go to Democrat parties and candidates. And so, I mean, if it was a little bit different, if it was like maybe 60-40 or 70-30, but 90% go to Democrat, which leads me to believe that there is a left-leaning bias at Google. Now, everybody laughed at me when I said that because of course there is, but still it provides evidence that there is a left-wing bias. I mean, the same CEO said when in 2016 when Donald Trump won the election that Google was going to invest heavily into AI so that they could combat misinformation. And the problem with that is if you're going to be a warrior to combat misinformation,
anything you don't like is misinformation.
Yeah, anything you don't like, which only 10% of the people at Google apparently are conservatives, anything that you don't like is automatically misinformation. Again, whenever you're winning an argument against a liberal, the easy button always comes out. You're a racist. You're a bigot. There is no argument to be made. But if you can control the narrative, and you have social media to do it, and you have search to do it, it's literally a information war, and only one person or one side gets to choose what the information is.
Well, when I heard about all the things that people tried to do in Google Gemini, like picture George Washington, a picture of the founding fathers, a picture of Nazis. No, not one white person. Of course, now they've kind of shut it down to where we can't go and look. I'm like, Napoleon Dynamite riding a polar bear. I wonder what that would come out like.
I'd love to see that. I paid money to see that.
It'd be like Shaquille O'Neal riding a grizzly bear or something. But when I heard about this, I was like, crap, man. My mom just sold her house, and I told her I didn't want all those 1982 Encyclopedia Britannicas. I wish I had gotten them now because they're going to revise history. And, I'm going to go from wanting to be tidying up with Marie Kondo on Netflix to hoarders. Right. And I think this whole debacle just increased the prices on 1998 CD-ROMs of Encyclopedia Britannica that are listed on eBay. Those people get to increase their prices now,
because and the reason we're saying that is there has been
they're changing history.
They're changing history. You go to Wikipedia and you can see people editing and changing history to fit whatever the narrative is that you want. So can you imagine going back and looking at some of those old encyclopedias? Those things are gold mines now.
Yeah. And we're not the only people suspecting a revisionist history. First of all, if you want a revisionist history, just look at Tucker Carlson's interview with Putin. He has his own version of Russian history. But also Barry Weiss, who founded the Free Press. She used to work for New York Times, so she's not some, cyber warrior. She delivered the State of World Jewry lecture at, sorry if I'm mispronouncing this, 92Y. It was a big speech. She says, quote, by leftists who glorify terrorists and by rightists who glorify tyrants, by technology companies that revise history and tell us it's justice. And there's so much truth in that. Just think, 1619 Project, revisionist history.
Right.
We're not the only ones who are aware.
Yeah, and the thing I think is as companies got more powerful, and there is grumblings of monopolies and threats to break up Meta and things like that. But I remember when the internet was kind of in its infancy, and I was in college, there were a number of search sites. Like Google wasn't the end all be all. I remember AskJeeves.com.
Dating ourselves here.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's been changed now to ask.com, but AskJeeves.com and other things. I mean, Internet Explorer wasn't the main search or internet access portal point. Netscape was the big one, and it was in competition with Internet Explorer. And I preferred Netscape anyway to access the internet. And the vast majority of the internet that I had to do, I had to go onto the college campus and log on to the computer labs computers in order to get on the internet. But still, I think when Google became the dominant search engine by far, it is literally the 800-pound gorilla in the room. It now gets to dictate. And does the wealthy conservative movement need to start creating their own tech?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we're already getting conservative banks. I think Larry Elder and John Rich are part of it. I forget the name of it. And then you have Public Square, I believe, is the conservative alternative to Amazon. So yeah, search engine. Let's go.
Yep.
Maybe Elon can help us out with that.
Yeah, I mean,
Elon, do an AI.
Exactly. I'm surprised. I'm surprised that he hasn't. I mean, he's involved in so many other companies, but honestly, I wouldn't even necessarily enjoy a conservative AI, but I certainly don't want a liberal biased AI. What I'd love to see is a neutral AI, something that can be used by everybody, and it doesn't have a political slant to it. Honestly, Google needs to hire conservatives and partner with liberals so that they can create neutrality.
Well, that's going to be really hard to do because I don't think they're at the point of having mostly liberals on their staff. I think they're at the point of having leftists.
Yeah,
mostly leftists
that's
on
true.
Their staff. What I would want is, at the bare minimum, when we're talking about history, it should be like opening something from 1982, not 1984.
Right.
But, 1982 Encyclopedia Britannica, and it should be the same. The book should be the same as what's on your historical websites.
No, I agree. There was no bias that was going on in those. It was, the old BBC, the sky is blue, water is wet, and moving on to the next story in the dry BBC way. Even, BBC is starting to get a slant on it as well. And that really saddens me because the BBC was usually the gold standard for just that stuffy, dry British, news anchor that is just literally just saying the facts and then moving on to the next fact. Mm-hmm. And it has saddened me. So this is the new battleground that has been identified. Turns out it's been a battleground for a long time, but the information space battleground, while not new, is finally being realized by conservatives that there is a problem and that bias is very real. Thank you so much for tuning into Azimuth Podcast. Please stay tuned after these messages.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for listening. If you enjoy our show with all the stories we share, we would love your support.
And it's as easy as clicking that subscribe or follow button. This will ensure you never miss an episode and keeps us bringing you these important stories. Your support makes a huge difference. Thank you so much for being part of our podcast family.
Thanks, and keep tuning in.
One event, two spins. Welcome to Azimuth Podcast. I'm Kimberly McNabb, and with me is my loving husband, Barrett McNabb. So, I have two different news articles, same event. First, we'll talk about the New York Post article and then a CNBC article. So, the New York Post article is much shorter. 20 European leaders gather in Paris to send a message of European resolve on Ukraine to Putin, as France's Macron's advisors say that Russia has escalated aggression in recent weeks. Macron commented to other leaders, "Let us have the humility to note that we have often been 6 to 12 months late, and that sending troops on the ground should not be excluded." No crap, Sherlock.
Right. I mean, you can just see the funding debacle that we have with the $60 billion going to Ukraine as it is just moving back and forth. Honestly, we're going to get to the other article, but I wanted to seize on this point. Most of the NATO members freaked out when Macron said that, who's the president of France, but there were some other countries such as Slovenia that said, "Hey, look, we'd be game to throw in troops." Now, when you look at what the troop levels would be, I don't think that he is talking about sending in brigade combat teams to go and fight alongside Ukraine's maneuver forces. I think he's talking about military advisors to be able to operate some of the high-tech equipment, anti-missile defense systems and things like that. But still, it would be a huge ramp-up to have NATO troops. No, they wouldn't be NATO troops. It would be French troops. Yes, France is a member of NATO, but I don't think they'd have the blue compass patch on their uniforms representing NATO. But still, it just goes to show that people are becoming weary of this war. And it has gone on now for 2 years, and we're really kind of sitting at this stalemate, and Putin's happy to have it at a stalemate because a stalemate, he wins.
Oh, yes. This is his dream. And I think having any troops fighting force or just advisors on the ground kind of sends a red flag to the public. Just hear troops on the ground, that their brain kind of stops, like, oh,
right.
There's troops on the ground. Oh my God, it's World War III. And so that's rubs people the wrong way. But, the 6 to 12 months late comment, that's very true because, it's not like we can just say, okay, we're going to send help to Ukraine. For instance, here, it has to pass Congress. It has to be shipped. It has to be unpacked. It has to be, recalibrated for, shipping or whatever. So it takes time. Now, other countries where you don't have so many levels of government and agreement to go through, all the red tape to go through like we do here, it still takes time.
Right.
And so, yeah, it is late, quote unquote.
Well, Biden made the comment that we're going to continue to help Ukraine for as long as it takes. And he has now amended that statement to "we will help Ukraine for as long as we can." And obviously that
kind
goes,
of acknowledging we're growing weary.
Exactly. And whose fault is it? It's our fault. It's the administration's fault. The decision should have been made at the Pentagon and in the White House, and it should have a unity of effort. But the decision should have been made, or the question should have been asked: do we want Ukraine to win or not? Decisively.
Yes.
That's the question.
You don't win by trickling. Like the approach really has been kind of like, okay, you have ants in your house. You kill one here, one here, one here, one here, just a little trickling effect, or you're going to bombard them where they stay out of your house. Right. They all die and they stay out of your house. Yeah,
exactly. The thing is instead of saying, hey, in this fiscal quarter, we'll give $60 billion. We'll skip a fiscal quarter, and then the next fiscal quarter, we'll argue whether or not we could give another $50 billion. What should have happened is that the United States should have said, do we want them to win? Yes, no, $1 trillion. And it needs to be decisive. And we're going to commit to giving 30 brigade combat teams worth of equipment. Now, these are made up numbers, obviously, but the
just
point...
whatever is required to win right away, to overwhelm...
Decisively win.
You win by overwhelming, not, trying to match one-on-one because, it could just go on forever.
Yeah,
if you send a clear message.
If you're giving one tank at a time, and you're sending it down a road and it gets destroyed, and you send another tank down the road all by itself and it gets destroyed, and that is just madness. It's madness to trickle in your forces. You need to have mass and concentration and completely overwhelm the enemy, and that is the failure of what we have done in Ukraine, is that we have trickled in equipment and pledged dollars. To Macron's point, it has taken a year to get equipment there. Ukraine's national defense minister has said, look, we've gotten lots of pledges, but people haven't ponied up yet. Yeah. And that lag is allowing Russia to go on the offensive, to shore up their defense. And, it's just absolutely incredible. But we're going to, Kimberly, what was the spin that was put on the same event?
So CNBC definitely had a different slant to it. This article focused on how basically hilarious Russia finds Macron's words and refers to his statements as gaffes, and that his statements were wildly rejected by NATO. And, this plays into Putin's narrative, as we could witness for ourselves in Tucker Carlson's interview with Putin. CNBC also reports that Putin warned that any move to put Western boots on the ground in Ukraine would lead to inevitable conflict. Russian State Duma chairman said that Macron would do well to remember how it ended for Napoleon in 1812. Also, in this CNBC article, the network could not help itself to be further divisive. The article quoted Timothy Ash at Blue Bay Asset. Macron's comments would also likely to be seized on by Putin's allies in the GOP to stall agreeing military support for Ukraine. Man, they just could not help themselves, could they?
No, that they couldn't. But to put the spin, that's what people do. That's the job of politicians, and the job of editorialists is to put whatever spin that you want to put on there.
Yeah, but news articles should be.
They should be.
This is what was said. This was the response.
Yeah, I completely agree. But it goes back to decisiveness, and if we want to win or don't want to win. So there's been cases made by Republicans, some Republicans, that say, look, this is not really that big of a deal. What's wrong with letting Putin have Ukraine? And then you have other voices that, like Nikki Haley, who is saying, look, he has said that if Ukraine falls, the Baltics are next. And that's, for those of you not aware, Latvia, Estonia.
And this is not like the first place he's overtaken. He has taken Georgia and Crimea.
Exactly.
So he's not going to stop, kind of like Hitler would not have stopped.
Right. And so that's going to make it so that there's the potential of a greater war and the expansion of the war. And here's the problem. Russia, we've put all these sanctions on Russia. Russia's has transformed. Are they actually
enforced? That's my bigger question.
So you have major players like India and Iran and China and North Korea that are ignoring them, right? So they have trading partners, but the problem is Russia has transformed its economy onto wartime footing, meaning that industrial plants are making ammunition. Industrial plants and factories are churning out tanks. Now, Russia's having to dig deep into mothballed, stuff that was from the 60s and 70s. But still, they're making new equipment, whereas the U.S. defense industry is kind of ramping down equipment. Now, there's been a task to ramp it back up so that we could produce 155 shells, to give over to Ukraine and things like that. But Russia is prepared, and so what is going to happen when Russia wins Ukraine and they're ready to move on to the next step? They're already at a wartime footing for the continuous production of armored vehicles and things like that. One of the problems that I see is there is a book that I believe is on the Commandant of the Marine Corps' mandatory list, and it's a science fiction. This is kind of odd, but it's a science fiction book that Marines love, and I've read it as well. And it's called Ender's Game. They made a movie Didn't like the movie as much as the book, but it focuses on a young boy that has a genius level ability for spatial awareness and for doing massive grand battle plans. I'm gonna skip all of the stuff, but talk to the point that the chapter that the Marines
relevant part.
that get excited about. Without getting into too much boring detail, these children are all trying to find out who would be a great grand master, and they're looking at genius level children. They implant basically a body cam into the children so they can see and hear what the children are seeing, hearing, and thinking, and how they come up with problems to solutions. So this one kid is really high on the list, and they decide to remove his body cam implant. And immediately, he's kind of small, immediately everybody says, oh, you've washed out of the program. And some of the larger kids pick a fight with him, okay? And Ender sees how the fighting stance of the individual is, and he was able to trip the person and get on him, and he grabbed an object and he started just absolutely beating the tar out of this bigger bully. And he won the fight, but he kept going and kept hitting the person again and again and again, even though the person had passed out. And the other children were looking at him horrified. So they were part of the bullying group, but they were looking at him horrified, and he kept going. And finally, he lets him up. The staff, the teachers and instructors come, and they come to Ender's house, and they asked him why he kept hitting the kid even after he won the fight. And the response was simple. I wanted to win all of the future fights at that point in time as well.
Not about proportionality. I hate that word because proportionality just lets stuff go on forever. No, end it now.
So I wanted to end that fight, and by ending the fight the way I did, I ended all of the future fights. And that is what needs to happen. We need to decide whether or not we're going to be decisive in Ukraine. If the answer is no, that's fine. That's fine. If the answer is yes, let's get it done. If the answer is no, then let's get out. But I don't see the value of giving $60 billion and then arguing whether we're going to give $60 billion more and have it trickle in and have it be wasted.
And stop these omnibus, I call them pork barreling bills. One issue bill, and if I were a member of Congress, I would say, okay, what is it going to take for this to end right away?
Right.
And have defense, strategists give a game plan, obviously talking with Ukraine, like what would it take to win right away as soon as possible? Like,
and give it to
and this is the last thing we're doing. If you can't win with this, then sorry, nice knowing you.
Yeah, but there has to be a limit. It can't be an unlimited
blank check. It has to come with a plan. Like if you're going to invest in a business, like if you want me to invest in your business, I want to see your whole plan. What work have you done? And why would I want to?
Right. And if it's not going to work, then you need to cut your losses. But whenever you see all of these, because there's lots of countries, the European Union is giving money, the United States is giving money, Canada is giving money, but you're seeing $600 million here and 60 billion here, and it just continues to trickle, and it's coming from different directions, and it's being spent. I mean, it's being spent, but then it's done, and now they need more. So we need to decide as a NATO, as the European Union, as the United States, we need to decide what is it that we're willing to do, and then do it.
And not just a blank check. Have a plan.
Yeah.
And do it right away.
And if it's not going to work, then stop it.
Yeah, and Putin's laughing because, he was almost laughing. I felt in listening to that interview with Tucker Carlson, like, right. The West isn't going to do anything to me. Look, prove him wrong.
Right, exactly. So anyway, it's almost kind of like Yoda's wise words. Do or do not. There is no try. Okay? So we're going to leave it there, and thank you for tuning in to Azimuth Podcast. Have a great day.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for listening. If you enjoy our show with all the stories we share, we would love your support.
And it's as easy as clicking that subscribe or follow button. This will ensure you never miss an episode and keeps us bringing you these important stories. Your support makes a huge difference. Thank you so much for being part of our podcast family.
Thanks, and keep tuning in.